Hey guys, welcome to Latinx Voices podcast. My name is Mariana.
My name is Sandra.
My name is Myra.
And my name is Hector. And we're going to pick up a conversation that we left last episode. So this is really just a continuation of the first theme. And so we're going to start off by talking about work schedules and lack of access to transportation that limits youth and their out-of-school time options.
Yeah, so activities for out-of-school time are not as available, especially to the youth when there's a lack of transportation or time open for the parents to be able to support their children doing activities. And one of the quotes that we have is from a mother of three, Abril, and she told us about her children and them having some limited options for their out-of-school activities.
Yeah, so she said, my kids never really volunteered or did sports. They almost always worked during the summer. Ever since they were old enough to work, my husband took them to work with him in an outdoor labor job. I could never take my kids anywhere because we only have one car and we had just arrived in the U.S. 11 years ago. My kids quickly picked up English, but we couldn't make time for them because at the time we were both working.
I think this relates a lot to, our experiences. Or, I'll share some of mine. I did have time for soccer, but that was because at the moment I started driving. And because we were able to get that car, I was able to go to all these extracurricular activities. My parents wouldn't be able to pick me up. If without my car, I would have to ask one of my teammates for a ride. And since I started driving, it was just me. I was the one that was going to the games, going to practices, doing all this. I really do feel like that in itself is very limiting to the opportunities we do have.
Yeah, for me, I actually didn't live in the district, so I had to commute like 15 minutes, 20 minutes every day. And when I was in high school, I had to drive. Like once I got out, I would get out like at 2:20. I would have to go straight to the middle school my brother went to pick him up, and then I would have to go and pick up my mom. So I did not have any time for any extracurricular activities just because I had so many responsibilities as, being the only one who could drive. In that case, my sister was in college and my dad was working. So I just couldn't do sports. I always wanted to, but I just couldn't ever. So I definitely relate to what Abril said.
Yeah, and I would even add that it puts us at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
And it kind of, in a way, forces us to grow up early because while our parents are gone, it's just the children. And mostly these households have more than two or more than one children. So you have the older child that may be, like 10 or 11 that's stuck taking care of the newborn and the younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll add to that how, I think during summers I've always gone back to school and heard people say like, oh, I've gone to this camp or that camp. And it's like growing up in elementary, middle school, or high school, it's like I never did anything. Like I was just always like, oh, you went to camp? Like, what's that like? And it was just always kind of interesting to see how being at home, it was just being at home, and God knows what I did because I don't even remember what, probably watched television or something. And it's kind of crazy how there's a disadvantage how we didn't have those types of resources available for us to have camps and extra resources for us to engage in some sort of learning or activities during the summers at least.
Yeah, so when I realized that I was actually good at soccer, I wanted to join this club that was 45 minutes away from where I live. And they were, one of those academy clubs. And I totally missed out on a potential full scholarship in that just because I didn't have anyone to take me there. And at the time, it was before I started driving. And, my dad was the one with the car. And on the weekends, he would use that time to do, yard work for other people for money. And so, like, I was put in that position where, would I rather interrupt that or just let that happen?
Yeah, and I think that that attributes to the lack of transportation throughout, because you have kids and the parents also, wanting their children to do what they want to do, but the fact that sometimes they have to work and they don't have a vehicle to take them, and then the fact that the bus doesn't necessarily help, it only takes them to and from school and not from practice or any other activity after, really hurts them. And I can give an example of Spartanburg itself. The bus transportation system here, it does not reach out to an area in Spartanburg that has mostly Latino. It's mostly a Latino community. It doesn't even reach over there. So that puts that community at a whole disadvantage.
Yeah, and so one of our interviewees, Paola, she told us that her own work outside the home ended up limiting her. And she said, for middle school, up until I was 15 or 16 when I could work, I played soccer after school. So that's why most of my time revolved around and other academic stuff. Once I could start working, then I just made the choice to quit soccer and just start working. So that's all I did, just work, school, and work.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of can relate to that too, where my junior year, my academics got so much more challenging that I couldn't do soccer or any sports. I had to dedicate myself to working and school. And I mean, it was tough, but you had to sacrifice the things you loved in order to provide for your family or to help out and to have your priorities be different than your peers.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot from just relatives or other friends that I have when they played soccer and team when I played soccer and one day they stopped coming and you'd see them in the hallway, hey bro, what's up? And they're like, it's because I started working. I gotta help my family out financially.
Yeah.
And it's that sacrifice they're willing to put in for the success of their families, which is limiting in the first place. Yeah.
And I feel like that too can also bring like social awkwardness as well. When I stopped playing soccer, my teammates were kind of like upset towards me. They were like, "Why'd you leave the team?" And like kind of had some sort of rancor towards it. But I was like, I couldn't help it. I'm sorry. Like I have to focus on what these different priorities are. Like, and it's just kind of it makes it awkward between social experiences and friends.
Yeah, and I kind of want to add, I mean, you guys were able to participate in sports, but like me who wasn't able to, it kind of puts you in a position where you don't really feel like you fit in. Like you don't fit in with people who play sports or people, you know what I'm saying? Especially being Latinx. So I think kind of what you guys were saying about it putting you at a disadvantage, I feel like sometimes it was hard for me to socialize with people. Even coming to college, like people would go to camps over summer. They would do all these after school activities, like be in like clubs and stuff. And I didn't have that. So it was like I didn't have anything to talk about, you know what I'm saying? So most of my experiences, I would say, definitely came from college. And this directly ties into working schedules and how they limit time to connect as a family. Latinx individuals recounted that parents spent a lot of their time working, which gave them less time for them to interact with family.
And still, even though Brianna is able to spend time with her daughter and supports her after school activities, she told us that time with her family being all together is rare, even on weekends. And she says, well, in reality, it's very rare if we ever spend time together as a family. For example, my son works in a restaurant, and usually it's Saturdays and Sundays. My husband mostly works during the weekend and has days off during the week.
Yeah, so to add on to that, I would say that it hurts the relationships between the fathers and the children because more likely it's usually the fathers that are working after hours and the mothers are staying home to take care of the children. And so even from an early age, you're not getting a relationship with your father. And that was how it was at my house. Now we have a much better relationship, but I think I could have had, a more loving one and a more caring one had he been present like my mom was. So I was much more confident talking to my mom than my dad.
Still to this day, I mean, kind of adding on to what you said, still to this day, my dad works every day of the week. So I think to me, it's like it makes it hard for me to understand when to take a break. Like, it's always work, work, work. And, like, I feel like sometimes even with me, I don't know when to chill. Like, I don't know what it is to have, like, family time or to do a cookout. I mean, we have cookouts, but it's not like a whole day thing with the family. It's like 1 or 2 hours, you know?
Yeah, I feel like I can also resonate with this where there's a point in time in my family where my dad would travel all the way to Georgia and other states to do construction work. And so there would be like long periods of times when I wouldn't see him, and it would just be like no family time at all whatsoever. Or then now my mom just works like weekends, and that's when my dad has off, and it's like very rare where we have a communicative time where we all kind of spend with each other, unless if it's like a very important occasion she gets off and we can kind of have some time together. But it's super rare where we actually have those weekends off, or like we usually see people as families like going to movie nights and things like that. So it's like not very often.
And this directly ties into gender roles again, just because it's always like our dads that have to go out of the house. And then for me, like as soon as I could start working with him, he took me to work with him. And so that took away family time during the weekends. And, we're already at school for 8 hours a week. We come back, homework, all that stuff. Like social interaction really isn't a big part of that. Just, I guess, just in the sense that we don't have very deep discussions or anything. And in that sense, it's kind of modified in a way, because even young women and, Latinas in general, I mean, they've also gone out of their way to find a job to support their families. And, it affects our mental health too, just because it adds more stress, and we don't know how to communicate our feelings to our parents. And so when the time comes down to it, we're like, dang.
How do you do it?
Yeah.
How do you communicate with your parents? Yeah.
Yeah, and so we have another interviewee, Victoria, and so she mentioned several times how much her parents work, and the interviewer asked her, could you tell me a bit about after school? Would your parents still be at work? To which she replied, most of the time, sometimes my mom gets out at 7, sometimes she gets out at 4. It just depends on her work days. My dad would come home around 8. He works for his own, he does his yard company. But recently he started coming home around 6 or 7. It just really depends. But yeah, he used to come home late. By the time he would come home, we would all be done eating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Hector, like you said about the gender roles, it creates a cycle that then when we grow up, we'll be like, oh, well, we're used to not seeing the man in the house a lot, and we're used to him not interacting with the family, so that's normal. So we don't have to, worry about that. And like you were saying about the mental health, it just hurts it all.
Yeah, and then I feel like when there's an opportunity that arises to where you have the chance to have a conversation, it's just very weird and awkward, and you don't even know where to begin a conversation, and it makes it feel uncomfortable, and it just feels more comfortable to just keep it quiet and not even talk about certain issues.
And I mean, I can also add that it puts even more stress on the mother.
Oh, yeah.
Because she's having to deal with how their little girl is feeling, and then also how their little boy is trying to feel when he could easily express his feelings with a father and have a father figure present. So it hurts everyone in the family, not having an ideal family time.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to add about those gender roles you guys were talking about. Recently, I had a conversation with my dad, and he was saying how he communicates with all three of us the same. I have an older sister and a younger brother. But I told him that's not true. My brother goes to work with you on the weekends, and he's told me you guys have talked about relationships. I've never talked to my dad about relationships, and even if I was to, I don't know how to. So it's like, you do have a difference between like let's say your dad, you have a boy in the family, he'll talk to them different, more openly than it is, with us girls. And like you said, it affects our mental health. Not only ours, but, everyone's.
And it becomes systemic just after a while, you never really learn the I feel, I want, I think statements.
Exactly.
It's always the don't do this, don't do that. And you learn to get silenced at an early
Yep.
age. And so later on, when you go through life, you silence yourself.
Yep.
And then the cycle just repeats itself, unfortunately. There are certain barriers to parental involvement in schools and children's healthcare. And among these, we can see English proficiency, work schedules, transportation. As a matter of fact, many land youth stated that due to parent inability in speaking proficiency, created barriers for parents to get involved. Also, along with them working and not being able to have a flexible schedule. And on top of all this, it's also the transportation to get to and from the school activities. And all of this really just works to prevent the youth from getting involved.
Yeah, and so one of our interviewees, Brianna, a mother of three, spoke of how the lack of transportation prevents her and her husband from giving their children the support that they would like to in school. And she said, if we had the opportunity to have a license, we would be able to drive our kids to school and support them. The school buses, too, are overpacked and they all squish together. Some mornings that they would come late, they would fit 4 kids in one seat, saying, oh, you guys are small enough to sit together, and we have them squished in one seat. So I would take them to school instead. Otherwise, knowing the routes would have helped too.
I think it shows a bit of some privilege, especially us having both of our parents working throughout the day, and some of our other classmates, just having their father work and their mother could just go about her day and help them. At my school, we had PTO, and most of my friends had their moms present at the PTO, so they were, organizing all these events and stuff and like having fun, seeing their parents throughout the day. And I remember when I was like younger in 3rd grade, I would just get upset because my mom was never there, and it wasn't her fault, she had to work. So early on, we just realized that we're different from everyone.
Yeah, it kind of like you're saying you were younger when you were upset. I remember being in elementary school, and you know how you would go to lunch, but sometimes like parents would bring children lunch and they would sit down with them. I always wanted that, but I just understood that I couldn't, like, that was just something I couldn't ask for because our parents were working and they couldn't do that. And then on top of that, my parents didn't speak English, so everything they knew about my academic life or my academic, life was basically what I told them. Yeah, and so Victoria also spoke about how her parents were rarely there for school events because they were working long hours. She spoke of this absence in terms of lack of support for her. I knew deep down they weren't going to be able to go because I was younger in elementary school. There would be mother and father day events or bring this person or that person, and most of the time they couldn't go. So it's like I did not feel that support from the beginning. Therefore, as I got older, I was like, there's no point in me trying to tell them to come to this event. I guess at that young age, you don't realize until you start seeing other people being able to be around their parents or have that relationship with their parents, where the parents can come to those events and show support like that. And it's like you don't have it. So it comes to a point where as you get older, it's like, why even try to ask when you know they are going to be tired or get out late for work? You get used to it, so you don't even ask anymore. It kind of sucks sometimes, but also at the same time, it helped me out a lot. It helped me try to find more support in myself instead of having them to fall back on, although it's hard at times.
Yeah, and I think that it not only secludes us from our classmates who do have their parents available, but it also, secludes us and kind of makes us a little bit more independent at an early age within our own family because, like Victoria said, she didn't even mention it. So at that point, our parents aren't even involved in our academic and school careers.
And it sucks because, you want to invite your parents, you want them to come, but they can't. And it sucks because I feel that at a certain extent, it just becomes a habit. Something's gonna happen. You don't even bother asking your mom. You know what the answer is gonna be, and it's not that you don't want her to go, because you do want her to go. It's just that she can't or he can't, and you just don't ask. And it's a big, I would say, inequity issue, just because schools are always like, oh well, what can we do to have more Latinx inclusion? What can we do to have more Latinx voice? What can we do to have more Latinx participation? But again, it's a an equity issue, and it's that parents don't have transportation, they don't have access to things, we don't have access to things, and schools are already in a bad position to offer those things to other low income students, and just adding this big burden on them, first of all, is a fault of the system, and it affects directly us, the students, emotionally and just in our well being.
You know, and I would also like to add on the school side, they're not doing a good enough job or even an effort to help these Latino students, because they are seeing an increase in Latinos each year, but they still don't have like a Spanish translator. And I know because my mom works in the cafeteria at a primary school, and they're always having to call her while she's at work, and she's not even getting paid for that, to be a translator. But they're always using her, and I think that the schools definitely have the ability to pay for that and to have that be accessible. And if, I know that we mentioned that a lot of the parents are working throughout the day, but there are also some that don't, and that want to be part of their students' daily lives. And if they had like a paper in Spanish coming home with their child to tell them, that could definitely increase that.
Right. Something with an explanation that, can gravitate and get their attention to go to different programs and things that are organized by the school. I think that it's definitely, there's a really good point that Victoria makes in the quote where she says that they come home late and they're tired. And oftentimes, too, that was the case with my parents. It's like they were working in the sun all day and they're just tired, like at the point where they don't want to go to extra things that don't seem appealing or that they don't know much about. So it's definitely also to the availability and the time that things are scheduled. Like, I think too, if they are going to schedule things or get people to go out there, especially working class people, they should try scheduling it on the weekends or times when parents that are working can also make it to these events.
Yeah, and so this kind of also ties back to gender roles, because there are specific experiences for specific individuals, and I guess now we're touching on like the care work commitments of women and girls within the household. And in the sense that Latinx women and girls stated that they have a heavy workload at home. At times they're expected to help with household chores or to care for younger siblings, and mothers often work outside the home in addition to cooking, cleaning, and childcare in the home.
Yeah, I feel like, especially if your the first child in the family is a girl, that they're like the second mom for the rest. And they just have so many things going on in their mind. And I mean, that just ties back to the mental health, and and that can be another conversation, how there's not enough help for them because there's so much going on, not only in the mom's life but also in the daughter's, and they're just having to do so much.
Yeah, our interviewee Nicole, she said, or well, I remember she asked to be interviewed at a restaurant near her home, explaining, I chose this place for a reason. I will take any opportunity to get outside. Yeah, that's basically my life. I have to go back soon to babysit again for my sister. And, she also talked about bartering household chores to earn her phone bill and time out of the house. She later went on in the interview to say, I need a job soon. I want to get out of the house. I had to wash my mom's car today so that I could come here and meet you for the interview. And I always have to do chores or something like that to get my siblings to help me out with that stuff. So most of the time they kind of blackmail me. They will make me babysit or take them lunch in exchange to pay my phone bill.
I think that within that quote, you didn't see anything about school, because school is kind of like a second to everyone else, because you have your family that you need to make sure is being taken care of, and those bills and a job. And so that's why, school sometimes isn't a priority, and higher education percentages, especially for Latinos, is getting lower and lower, because at that point, we don't have an option but to seek a job and to get out of our home, because we're just not happy anymore. And that's like, we view it as our only way out.
And I think that is seen oftentimes too, because of, like, if your parents aren't educated, they don't know much about higher education, and they're not going to, push you in terms of, going towards higher education or college. And if they only know about work life, they're going to encourage you to do the work life and go into the workforce immediately, or do something that's immediately beneficial to the family, rather than you sitting there and studying. They might see it as a waste of time instead of you helping out at the house, taking care of the siblings, or doing chores.
Yeah, and I think that growing up, you are very influenced by people who socialize you, especially your parents. So if all your parents do is work, then you kind of start growing up with the idea that work's the only way to succeed. And I think it's definitely a little bit of a different case for us, since we're in college right now and stuff like that. But I definitely agree how gender roles, especially how women, have multiple roles. Like, they'll go and work, 8 hours, 12 hours a day, and then still have to come clean, cook. Like, my mom does all that, and my dad just comes home from work and he just like sits down, but he comes later. But you know what I'm saying? Like, definitely. And I even, like, to me, I do that. Like, if I'm not here at Wofford and I go home, I know my dad's going to work, my mom's going to work, and I stay at home with my brother. I clean, I cook, and my brother just chills,
And it's hard. It's really hard, especially us that we go to college. And, I kind of always like to reflect on this, and just think about how we're first generation, and in the sense we're the first to come to college. But that doesn't mean that our struggles or our experiences get left behind. We bring those things with us, and they stay with us here, the added on stress. And then we would go back, we go right back into the system. And so, like, another one of our interviewees, Sophia, she painted a similar picture. She had opportunities to get outside the house, but she also had a significant in-home responsibility. And, she's in college. I think that's very important to mention, too, as she stated in her interview. Then she went on to say that there was a lot of cleaning going on. We would go play outside, occasionally going out to shop or go to other places like the mall, just so we could get out of the house. When we asked her for more details, Sophia talked about being home a lot and mentioned her older sister sometimes being responsible for picking her up after sports practice.
Yeah, I think her mentioning how she'll take any opportunity to get out of the house. When I go home for long periods of time, like a week, the only way I can get out of the house is to go get like coffee early in the morning, go pick up my mom from work at like 3, and then I'm home all like every other, time. So I can definitely relate to that. Like, you're just so sick of staying home. So that's why sometimes I'd prefer to be here at Wofford, just because there's more, you can do more,
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, in the sense that, that's kind of why I pursued doing summer internships in the summer on campus instead of home, since I live 3 hours away. I even though I love my family, every chance I can get to just, be independent and do my own thing without having to be at home, I think it's just always preferable. But
because you're so used to it, you know what I'm saying? You're so used to like 21 years of our lives staying home all the time, and then all of a sudden you get to see more, and you're just like, I love my family, but at the same time I just like this a lot too,
Right. Since you're expected to do so much for your family, to clean and to do so much for them, it's like sometimes you want a break. And sometimes too you seem selfish for it if you want to have your own break, and it's like, no, it's not like that. But You know.
That's why I like to joke around and kind of put things in light of the pandemic. When we were in quarantine and, we were stuck indoors, there were a lot of people, not Latinx, that complained about being indoors for, like after a week, after a few days.
Definitely.
And we were like, oh, we're Latino. We got this. We've gone through this our whole lives, that it's just really the same. Just more dangerous, I guess, to go outside.
Yeah, it's nothing different. It really isn't. I've been quarantined my whole life.
Yeah.
I think that goes back, like, now that we're in college and we're spending a lot of time away from our family, but then, like you said, Mariana, even for a week when we're there and we're just like, all right, we need to get out.
Yeah.
Our parents, they just take it the wrong way, and they're like, oh, you don't want to be with the family?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, like, and sometimes it makes us feel bad because they just really can't comprehend that mental stability that we need in that time away from family and being independent on our own, that we need.
Yeah, I think especially Latinos, as Latinx people, we take family as very important. And then, like you said, Sandra, if, after 2 days you're done being home, then they'll be like, oh, you don't want to be with us anymore? And it always makes me feel bad. And it never changes. I always feel really guilty because then I get into that whole cycle that it's like, my parents do so much for me, and why can't I stay home? And then it's just like I'm unhappy, guilty, and it's just like...
Right. And then we can't even deal with it because we don't know how to express our emotions with them. So it's like, oh, we feel this way. We can't do anything about it. We want to do this, but yet we can't.
We can't.
Yeah.
It's like you're suppressed.
Right. We bottle it up to ourselves, and it's just a cycle. And then we just rely on ourselves, and we don't want to express our emotions or feelings to others, and it just goes back around and hurts us.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, guys. So I think that wraps up the first theme of the report. So next time we're going to talk about social connectedness and institutional spaces. And, this will be like schools, theater programs, just extracurricular activities that have to do with school or, even the church. So stay tuned for our next episode. Peace.
Adios.
Hasta luego.
Bye.